Welcome to a new morning of the LEA webinars. We are today having a very interesting conversation with Susana Robledo Reber about mobilizing private capital in order to build resilient supply chains, and especially how you deal with smallholder farmers. So I think it's going to be a very interesting issue, and it will touch on some examples from not exactly where I'm from. This mostly Colombia, but I'm from Latin America, so it's a little bit of my home too. So, and I think it's going to be a very interesting webinar too, because it's the first, if you've been following some of these webinars, and some of you I know come to different ones, it's the first webinar that we have with a representative from a corporation. So we have Nespresso. We did have people from the private sector, from financial institutions, from foundations, from commercial banks, if you want. And we have mentioned some corporations like Michelin or different businesses in the cocoa industry. But usually the speakers were coming from foundations or from banks at the time. So I think listening to the corporate side of the story is also interesting. And as I told you, if you've been participating on these webinars, the idea is to have the representation of different players. Very soon we will have also a person that was a social entrepreneur, to see how you can actually mobilize private capital to bring social innovation or to find market solutions, especially when we see that there are market failures and we had to create a market. And I think with the case of smallholder farmers, and especially coffee farmers that we're going to talk today, this is going to be very interesting and very clear to see how to address these issues. And I think you will enjoy it. So again, I think something that we learned from the COVID crisis, and I think from the previous webinars, we've seen that many corporations are trying to transform to respond to societal challenges. And if we've seen this, if the COVID crisis had done something positive, and I know in many countries we are seeing a second wave, and even here in Switzerland we're seeing cases mounting and we're worried about it. But if something can come up is positive about this, is precisely the sense of urgency on how to address, on how to transform. And I think one of the topics that, if you follow ESG, environmental, social, and governance criteria, that we have seen popping up as very important during the COVID crisis has been how you deal with your value chain. So there were also issues about labor rights, about safety and security, and some governance issues. But in the past, we focused a lot on environmental challenges. We will talk a little bit about climate change and environmental side of the story. But something we have realized during this crisis is also that we need to address the social challenges that come also as part of consequence of environmental challenges and others. So another, I would say, silver lining, if you want, is that we have seen that many ESG funds or sustainable business, if you want, seem to have been outperforming the benchmarks during the COVID crisis. I know the data is relatively short, yes, but it seems to be a tendency that at least the financial sector is paying a lot of attention. And you have seen many different players during these webinars talking about it. Some of the webinars, so some of the people we talk that actually use ESG, environmental, social, and governance criteria to screen out poor performers, or to decide those companies that are not good to actually disinvest or tilt the distribution. Some, because there, I would say that in the background there is this assumption that these companies will, in the long term, or will soon enough, result in weak financial results too. And on the opposite side, we have seen a focus on high performance, expecting these promised financial results that we're starting to see some empirical evidence. We also see, and I think we had the Triodos Bank example here, where you have sometimes some investors that are even more activist and are trying to engage and push for corporate transformation. So we are seeing, and we talked a lot about the role of mobilizing private capital to really speed up and foster the kind of transformation towards sustainable business models. But we have not seen maybe the other side, is how are corporates transforming, and what does good sustainability mean from a corporate side. And I've seen, and I talked to many corporates from the LEA Center and in IMD executive programs. Sometimes the first question is, what does sustainability mean to me? So how do I start? Where do I start? And today's webinar is not going to be about sustainability in general, about Nespresso. We're going to talk about two very specific solutions or innovations that are focusing on, especially on managing the value chain. But I think that to introduce the topic, I would like to go back to something that we covered, I think, in one of the webinars when Fabio Segura from the Jacob Foundation was with us. And one is the idea of sustainability. And just to show you something, and actually this paper is from 2016, so it's previous to the COVID crisis. In the top graph, you are going to see that actually businesses that are, you see the stock market price, the stock price performance of portfolios in the graph, the evolution, not the time series. And if you look at the red time series, these are top performers in the ESG rankings of MSCI, if you want data, compared to the bottom performers, those that do not perform very well in the rankings of MSCI. And these are that corporates that focus on material ESG issues. And what you're going to see is that there is almost a 6% difference in the return that these good performers are receiving. So, and if you see, the difference has been broadening almost after the global financial crisis. While if you look at the bottom, the top performers and the bottom performers that work on sustainability, there is no statistical difference in financial returns if they don't focus on material issues. So these are companies that focus on immaterial issues. So really, a lot of corporations after this, they realized that they had to reflect on what are the key issues, the material issues that affect their core business and their financial sustainability, and really how can we have a more aligned or a more strategic way of thinking about sustainability. And when we talk about materiality, really the definition of materiality comes from accounting, and it is really those issues that can substantially affect an organization's ability to create value in the short, medium, or long term. When we take it to the financial sector, and SASB, Sustainability Accounting Standard Board, actually define it in a sustainability context, and is the one that is widely used by the financial sector, are the sustainability criteria that is likely to affect the financial condition or operating performance of companies. And if you add, and most of you might be familiar with GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative, adds another layer saying that it's not only important for the financial condition of the company, but it's also important to other stakeholders. So from that, you can define, given the industry or the company or the sector that you're in, what are your key issues or the issues that you need to focus. And let me show you a little bit for Nespresso, because I think it will frame the discussion or the conversation we're going to have with Susana very soon. If you actually look at the materiality map, you're going to see these three pillars: sustainable production, business principles and values, and people. And on the top part of what it is material to Nespresso, you are going to find sustainable production. And if you go more specific on what they say that they want to focus, is rural development, climate change, and resource efficiency. And this is a little bit why I invited Susana to talk about this, because these are material issues for Nespresso, but these are material issues for many other companies. If you want consumer good companies, any company that uses resources or natural resources. And if you look also at what the WEF mentioned as long-term risk outlook, we are going to see that climate action failure and extreme weather were kind of the top two risks. And if you want to get at climate action failure, it's one of the top impacts that has been identified. So how companies manage these risks and what is going to happen will affect financial performance, but also affects the livelihood of many people. And I would actually say that really climate change will take, and it is taking already, a disproportionate toll on developing countries, and especially on poor rural people. And smallholder farmers are an example of this. So the other thing we are going to focus is about two, and we're going to talk to Susana about two solutions that they found that are not the usual ones that you're going to see, and how they have collaborated. I'm very big in collaboration between the private and public sector. So just not to take too long, remember that at the bottom of the screen, there is a Q&A icon. You can click on that and write questions, and I will include your questions and ask Susana while we're talking so she can reply to you. And if they don't go necessarily along, we can also leave some questions to the end. But I will try to include as many questions as I can, because I think she has a very broad knowledge on and she's been really hands-on creating this solution. So please feel free to ask the questions in the Q&A. And if there is a question that somebody else is asking that you really like, click on the like, so that question will pop up to me. We also have Patrick Reichhardt here with me. He's a research fellow at the ELEA Center, and he will help us also with the Q&A and managing some of your questions if there are some that can be replied offline. So just not to keep talking, let me introduce you a little bit more formally, Susana Robledo Reber. She is now from, I think, not very long ago. She's been with Nespresso for quite a long time, but she has had a promotion now as the global brand and sustainability strategy at Nestlé Nespresso. You've seen that before when we started this webinar. Probably you've seen as innovation manager in the position. But I find very interesting even this side of the title of her position, because it shows that now sustainability is becoming much more embedded in what Nespresso wants their brand and their story and their even core business will be. So she really has developed the global sustainability strategy and led the sustainability innovation fund to catalyze impact initiatives. We've been talking a lot about funds and how we can direct private capital into impact initiatives. So this is, and we met like almost 3 years ago, I think, or 2 years and a half ago, in a program about social innovation at IMD. She developed also the Reviving Origins. That is a new coffee product range that engages with consumers on sustainability and works on countries where extreme political or weather conditions like Cuba, Zimbabwe, Puerto Rico. And she has worked very close with the Colombian government, with academics, with the private sector to create innovative schemes. And I think that part of collaboration is also very interesting to share here, because we know that sometimes collaborating with different players can be challenging. And especially to provide two programs that we're going to talk to today. One is the savings for retirement, and the other, the crop insurance for farmers. She has also led the work of circular startups such Velocity. I don't know if you have seen, these are iconic bikes actually made with recycled Nespresso capsules. And it is active over 50 countries. And she holds an engineering degree from Universidad Nacional de Colombia and an executive master degree from St. Gallen. So welcome, Susana. I'm extremely happy to have you here. You know that I cannot work in the morning, or I don't function without my coffee. So this is, I think I have a vested interest on having a sustainable supply. And I'm also conscious about the environment and labor relations. So it is a topic that is very dear to my heart, and I imagine to many of our audience. So why and how is climate change affecting coffee, and how it's affecting you as Nespresso specifically, and just to frame a little bit the discussion on the problematic.
Yes, so thank you, Vanina, for inviting me to your webinar today. It's great to be here. And yes, indeed, we are worried as you to make sure that the cup of coffee you have every morning remains and that the quality that you get remains, because we are seeing really a big shift in the countries of origin. There was a study done by the BBC, published a couple of years ago, where they said that if we continue to go as we are, we will start to see a decline in the coffee produced. Notably, half of the coffee that is produced today would disappear by 2050, given the conditions of climate change. Yes. So for us as a coffee company, this is very worrying because, of course, it's our key ingredient. And what we've done as Nespresso is to start to take this problematic that for me is not only about environmental development, but it's also about social development, because as you will see, climate change also touches the farmers very much. And as such, started to create something we call the AAA program. And you can go to the next slide. The AAA program is basically our response to how do we source coffee sustainably. And what we did is nearly 20 years ago, we set up this program with the Rainforest Alliance to offer farmers a response to how to sustainably develop their coffee. And as such, what we do is we have agronomists on the ground, so around 450 agronomists visiting the farmers every day, covering the farms themselves, but not just that, because we know that the communities are a key part of how do you produce coffee sustainably. So the cooperatives and the communities around coffee production, and as well as the landscape, which is for us a big part of the equation, because if you have one farmer doing, let's say, the homework and taking good care of the environment, but his neighbor totally polluting the river, for example, then you will have a larger problem. So we thought we need to touch all these three levels with the AAA program. To give you a little bit more detail before we enter into crop insurance and into pension, we have around 15 countries in the AAA program and 110,000 farmers. And what we do is we always partner with the best, or what we consider the best. So in this case, we have partnered with the Rainforest Alliance, as I mentioned, but also with Fair Trade. There's two Fair Trades, Fair Trade International, Fair Trade US. And we started to certify the coffee from this farm. So 95% of the coffee we sell comes from the AAA program, and half of it is certified.
Right, and we can see the scale and the broad range, or the impact that you have in rural communities that you work with, and how global, obviously, that impact is. So what role do these certifications play? And is it really enough to have a fair trade or rainforest, or have these certifications too? Because this may work more as a sign for me that I'm a consumer that is conscious about it, but how do you really mitigate risk and affect or improve the livelihood of farmers? Why do they matter?
That certifications and NGOs are definitely experts on sustainability, and they really help us to think through AAA on how we source. But I would say that sometimes certifications are not enough, because you can certify practices in the farm, and this is basically what a certificator will do. They will check that you go through certain practices in your daily jobs. However, you cannot guarantee that this will give more, let's say, a good earning, a good life to the farmers. And as such, for us, it was really the question we had in the back of our minds: how can we also support farmers in the risks that they are always exposed to, such as market and price volatility or climate risk? So we go back to certification is great because it's a base and it gives you as a consumer the check that everything is done correctly. But we need to go one step beyond and build things and systems that are really helping the communities thrive. And as such, this is how the Farmer Future program started. because we had this question in the back of our minds again, and we started to think, how do we bring something to farmers that is going to be more than just certification? And we started in Colombia because it's a place we have many of our farmers, so 30% of our farmers are in Colombia. They are smallholders, and we started to talk with the government and with fair trade. How do we go beyond certification? You can move to the next slide. What we did in this case was to start to think, okay, we need to build a collaboration with fair trade. So we want to bring in the social welfare tools that they develop through certification, but we want to develop them with the farmers. So in 2014, we started to create what we call the Farmer Future platform. And how we did it is we had focus groups with farmers. So we really went there and spent a lot of time with the farmers to see what are the biggest risks and what are the biggest problems that the farmers face in their everyday lives. And what came out was they told us that we have two big risks in our lives. The first one is we don't have a pension. We realized that only 7% of the farmers had access to a pension. And the second thing is that they saw that they had the climate shifts that really affected their crop and their income. So we said, let's start with the pension, which is, of course, not an easy start. And let's kick off with the government, because the government at the time was setting up a program to support pension. So we looked at it in the cooperative, and 1,000 farmers joined the conversation and said, let's go with pension. And then we took the second challenge for later.
What are many companies shy away sometimes of collaborating with governments? And we know that pensions and retirement can be also a very challenging topic when you talk about access and getting to rural areas. No? So what were the challenges and opportunities that you've seen by collaborating with Colombian government?
So first thing I would say, it's a great opportunity that they had started to think also about creating pensions for those people who couldn't save on a monthly basis, which was a big problem in Colombia. We are 50 million people, and 7 million, they don't have access to pensions. So it's not a problem only of farmers, but it's a larger program. And what helped us is that they wanted to do a pilot with us because we had access to the farmers and access to information, which was great. So on the one side, it's very powerful because you can really go big. On the other side, there's, of course, the slowness of working with the government and doing things properly. Because when you are talking about pension, you are talking about really people's lives, which is a huge and sensitive topic. So what we wanted to make sure as Nespresso is that we entered a new zone for us, which was pension, and that the farmers were protected and the money that they were saving was protected. Because in the past, sometimes they had, let's say, less good feedback from pensions, let's say private, and as such, we were really cautious to enter and to take their money on retirement with the government. So what we did is basically the government was setting up a fund where each person had their own personal account. They would put money for their retirement, as much money as they wanted and as often as they wanted. And when they had the age to retire, the government they would put 20% on top of what they saved. So already that was great because we started with premiums that Nespresso was paying for their coffee going through the pension fund. And then on top, you had the money that was added by the government. For us, that was very critical as well because in coffee, there is a big problematic of generational continuity. What it means is basically farmers are getting older and newer generations, they don't want to enter the coffee world because they think it's a heavy task and because also they didn't have access to pension. So we thought by providing access to pension, then we can facilitate this generational continuity and make coffee more attractive. And as such, we also realized that by going through the cooperative, because the cooperative was managing the premiums that we pay for fair trade coffee, we strengthened the cooperative and more people started to join the cooperative. So at the end, this program touched the cooperative, the government as a pilot, as well as coffee production itself. So it started to become something bigger than Nespresso.
Something that I always get in most of the webinars, I get questions about how do you measure the impact? Because you're talking about pension is something that may happen, you know, in the future. So how do you measure, or what are the results of this program since you started in 2014? And how do you measure that you have a positive impact?
Yes, indeed. This is the big question in sustainability. So for me, and I think for us, the biggest example of measuring impact was when the farmers started to retire. So around 170 farmers are now receiving their pension, which is for us the best example of impact, because before they wouldn't have received that. But there's other measures that we also started to have. So first, money that went into the pension. For the moment, we have, so by the end of last year, 6.3 million entering the pension fund, basically going to their individual accounts. Then also the amount of farmers who who joined the Farmer Future program. So we have 5,000 farmers, out of which 3,500 were in Colombia. And now, since other countries saw that this program is so interesting, it was copied and taken to Indonesia, which for us was great because you could start to see how you are expanding the impact.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to see the replication. No, you do a pilot, and if it works, you can scale it and replicate it in other places. Yeah.
Indeed, and the initially our thought was not we want to keep it for Nespresso, because for us it's a problematic that goes into the industry and beyond Nespresso, and as such we are happy that other cooperatives or other countries started to copy the program. We also saw that the farmers had confidence in the program because out of their own pocket money, they started to save money as well into their pensions. So 30% of the farmers put money on top of what we put into their accounts. And then what we saw as well is, since this was a pilot with the Colombian government, they also fine-tuned it and rolled it out in the rest of the country, eliminating some of the system that they had before, to open it up for more and more farmers. They had some restrictions and then they opened it up for more. And then what you see there as well, we also piloted with a private company in Indonesia, a private pension company, because we didn't have the government, so we had to go beyond that. Finally, the farmers were happy because they said, okay, now you can start to see that I have a future in coffee, I can have a pension, and then my kids are more interested to join the business. And lastly, we saw that the cooperative had more and more people wanted to join them because they were the center of the program. So on top of that, we started to see also other cooperatives that wanted to join us, which was for us a good measure of how it was working well.
And I know that you continued, and there were other demands when you've done this collaboration, or when you talk to the farmers to go beyond the pension fund. So what else were the claims or the demands from farmers that actually were interesting that you got involved? Because you are a consumer goods company, you're not a pension fund or a financial institution. And I know now you're going to talk about insurance. So why do you get involved in these kinds of initiatives? And you've seen you attracted more farmers, you talk about continuity, but why there was something else needed? What other initiatives you think were demanded or were part of what farmers conveyed to you in these conversations that you had?
So we do these programs because on the one side we have a deep responsibility, and on the other side we know that we need to source this coffee. And as we were saying, climate change is a big thing that is coming on the table. We already see it with the different crops. Some of the best years in terms of production and some of the worst have happened in the past couple of years. So it's really showing how there is a disequilibrium in coffee. And as such, the second big topic that the farmers brought to the table was insurance, because only 11% of the farmers have insurance, which is a super low number. And they told us, look, we are often exposed to rain or to droughts that are going to affect our income. And at the end of the day, if we don't produce, our family doesn't eat. So how can we be protected against these risks? So what we did in the meantime, so we scaled to different cooperatives, the pension program, and we started to design an insurance program with the experts. And again, here we entered into a zone where Nespresso is not our terrain to play. So we surrounded ourselves by experts that could help us to build this insurance. So in 2000, I would say before 2017, but we started to talk with the government, but also with a consortium of insurance companies that is called Blue Marble, and you will see who they are. You can move to the next slide. Voilà.
Let me ask you a question on this one, because I talked to several insurance companies many times, and they all expressed how difficult it is to reach smallholder farmers. And sometimes they say, okay, you have all kinds of risk, from health risks to credit risk to income risk, and you have also the environmental that you have been mentioning that can destroy actually their incomes and their livelihoods, and also the information. And it's really a high transaction cost to get the information of what is the damage if you have climate change. So the cost side is almost prohibitive. So in many cases for the insurance industry, this was an underserved, if you want, or really not a market that seemed very interesting. So why would you, that are again a corporate, get involved, and why Blue Marble, as you're mentioning, was willing to collaborate? What kind of win-win, or how you managed to align incentives? Because we talked in different webinars here how different players bring different assets to the table, and if you're able to align those incentives, really the collaborations can be successful. So what did you think you brought to the table, and what did Blue Marble or the partners bring to the table too, and why it wasn't so challenging to do it before without you? Why you felt that you had to get involved?
Yes, so indeed, there is a huge problematic in terms of insurance to go into the market of microinsurance, because today it's very expensive to, in the case of coffee, to visit every farm and to assess the losses. And this is becoming very difficult then when you want to have an attractive price for the insurance, because the small farmers are not able to pay it. So for a long time, we saw many different pilots in Colombia. They had tried in Brazil, maybe it's the place where you had bigger farms. So they tried and they were trying to bring something to the table in terms of insurance, but it wasn't so easy because of the price. I would say also on top of that, because people are skeptical of the results. So if they enter an insurance that for them is already a big cost, are they going to be paid back, and can they trust these organizations that are offering this insurance? And so what we did is we started to work with CAFEXPORT, which is the local operator and works closely with the cooperative, with Argilogic, that is a company that does these types of modeling for insurance, with the University of Colombia, who are experts on climate. So they have a climate center. And lastly, with Blue Marble, which was the big partner on insurance, to say, how do we break this difficultness of bringing microinsurance to farmers?
So Blue Marble here from Ashley. I know you're going to talk about your particular scheme, but since Ashley is asking, and again, feel free to ask additional questions, anybody else in the audience. She's asking, she works with Sprout Insurance Resilience, so she knows the climate insurance side of the story too. And she's saying, knowing that weather is a big factor in coffee quality, has Nespresso considered paying premiums for weather index crop insurance to protect farmers' income coffee production loss? And I know you're going to explain what is your scheme, but if you use any weather index crop in your insurance scheme.
So yes, indeed, and what we did use was an index insurance, and that was a bit the innovative part. You will see how we constructed it. So it took us a while to really get the recipe correct. And what we also did, to your question on premiums, and I know you're talking about insurance premiums, but it's important to say that is that we wanted to test this with premiums that we would pay as Nespresso rather than the farmers, so that if in case the pilot didn't work, they were also protected, because again, we didn't want them to use their own pocket money at the beginning to test. And once the program was, or the pilot insurance was working, then we would ask them to invest themselves, because if they invest themselves, then we realize we have a good product. So it was a bit what we did, but you will see how we get into
and
indexing.
I've seen that too, that the behavioral side is not the same. When you do microcredit, people see the results immediately of what can they do with the money. Even with pensions, it's not immediate, but when you talk about insurance, it's hard because the event can happen or not happen, and sometimes it's underestimated. So really understand and building trust, as you're saying, is a key part of these schemes to actually work. So, and you mentioned some of your partners that you work with to create the scheme.
Exactly, and we did, and you will see, we did consider the farmers as the partners in the creation of the insurance, because we needed them to tell us what works and what doesn't work for them. So as a client, they were part of the design, as well as they needed to trust us and to see that what we were creating is not a way to develop money, but it's really a way for them to be protected and have less risks with weather insurance. Right. So we worked with Blue Marble, that is really, for us, it was great because they created a microinsurance consortium that could bring in talent from all the different insurance companies that they cover. And what we did basically was, you can continue to the next slide, was move from the system of traditional insurance programs where you verify loss per loss in every farm, that was very expensive, as we just said, to satellite-based insurance, so an index insurance. I would say that this is really new in the area of agriculture. There's tests, and some have done really well, some have failed. I cannot say why some of them have failed, but I would say really a way to fail is not to consider your population, and this is what we really did. We went back again to Colombia to build it with the farmers. How it works, if you go to the next slide, basically we cut the areas of the farm on a 5 kilometer by 5 kilometer square range. And here we measure the weather variation. So we would pay, or the insurance would pay out to all the farmers that are in this square. And let's say proportionally to those who are in the end of the square. But the idea was really that we could go deeply into the zone, because as you might know, if you're a coffee lover, you have mountains and very big variations of weather in the different places. So if you continue to the next slide, basically what we did is a huge consultation with the farmers starting in 2014. So we went back again to say, what were the last 30 years for you like, and what were the worst moments in terms of weather? Where did you lose the most money? And then we checked this with satellite information to see if this correlated. And lastly, we started to show them a bit the product and what it would cover, because we were sensitive to see, okay, should it cover the full income of the production, but it will be more expensive, or should it cover only the costs that were already used by the farmer until the point they lost the crop, which would make the insurance less expensive. For the moment, we connected it to the cost of production, but we're refining, and hopefully we get to the level of covering the full income of the crop. So what we needed to get from the farmers was, what are the windows of time that are the most sensitive in terms of cultivation of coffee? And there is where we get two windows of time that for them are, if they don't pass this, they don't have a good crop. So the first one was, if there's too much rain during the flowering. So there is a flower in coffee. If you don't have the flower, you will not have a grain, so you will not have a crop. And the second one was, if there is too much drought when the grain is feeding, meaning that the quality of the grains will be low grade, and then the income will also be affected. So they will be paid less for their coffee. So we concentrated into these two windows because those were the most risky ones for them, and because we needed to also filter a little bit the full weather problematic.
And how does this insurance work in practice? We see how complex the issue is, that you need to actually get the good coffee we get in our cups, but also to improve the livelihood of those farmers. You found these 2 points, but what is the mechanics? How would the insurance actually work?
Okay, so
how you make the decisions, no? Yeah.
Yes. So it's a difficult decision because we want to make sure that the insurance works and that it pays back to the farmers. Otherwise, they will not see an interest to invest. But at the same time, we don't want to make it such a, let's say, such a recurrent payment that then it's not interesting for the insurance company to offer it. So it was a bit to find the balance between the two. So how it works is, I will show you an example of a drought. So we looked at, okay, what are the normal levels of rainfall for the farmers? In this case, the insurance would not pay because they will be happy with their crop. Then let's imagine that you start to see drought. So you can click to the next slide. When you have a bit of drought, so less rainfall, the insurance will start to pay. And you see here in the right, you see how much it starts to pay. So then let's imagine that it continues to rain even less. The insurance will pay much more. And then let's say that it continues to rain even less. There is a point in time when the insurance will stop paying out. We have a maximum amount. So you click on the next slide, you will see there is a moment of time where we will stop paying because it's too much of the losses. And then we will enter into, I would say, a much greater discussion, because what we've done, and you will see in a little video that we have later for you, is to say, okay, let's go to the maximum losses that they've had over the last period of 30 years, trying to cover as much of their losses as we can. But if it goes beyond that, and it can, because now we have weather variations that are so large, then we will take another route after that.
We have a question from Gonzal, F. Gonzal, that is actually, because we've seen that the behavioral side and winning the trust and the participation of farmers and information is a key component, and understanding, again, their needs and their willingness to later pay for these things. What recommendations would you give on how you build this trust with the farmers? What are the key issues?
Yes, I don't say that for us it's easy, but it was definitely easier because we were working with these farmers since 2003. As you saw, we had the AAA program already there, and the farmers know us. We go there often. We have agronomists that are visiting them, but also we are always going to the farms. Let's say now in the period of COVID, no, but in general, we would always go to the farm. So they know us well. We go back every crop, buy their coffee with a good premium. So they've seen in a way the work that we've done in the past, and this set the scene to start to create this new relationship with the insurance. So for Blue Marble, it was quite interesting to work with us because we opened the door, if you want, for the relationship with the farmer. And that was the critical part for us in the mix. And then getting their inputs in the product development was quite key, because initially we thought different things. Of course, we came in with our own ideas, and then they told us, look, we are interested to cover these 2 periods of the year. We are interested to cover our cost of production, because otherwise the insurance becomes too expensive. So these type of things helped us to also fine tune. So my recommendation is, if you can connect well to the local community, even before the insurance, that would be the best case scenario. And otherwise, building the product with them would be the best way to do a good job.
So I think, obviously, there are sometimes I get asked when I talk to corporates for the low-hanging fruits and the quick solutions, and there is no quick solution for building trust. And I don't think I will break any NDA. We work on a program, but Nespresso has a new CEO, and I remember in one program with a lot of their executives, one of the things he asked is, how many of you have been to our coffee farms? And he said, and if you have not, we need to we need to change that. So if you're working in Nespresso and talking to markets and talking to clients, you need to go and understand your product and understand the needs of the farmers. And for me, it was very interesting when I heard him saying that, and very consciously, and like people were afraid of not raising their hand and not having been ever to an espresso coffee farm. No, we have also another question from Rito here. And well, hi Rito, he's also a person that comes to some of these webinars often. And didn't Nespresso provide any loss coverage for the insurance company? So did you have to cover the other side too, or because you cover the
No,
or how was the relationship with the Blue Marble Group?
So we were, let's say, lucky, but in a way, we really looked for the right partner to do that. And Blue Marble had the advantage that they had the two, let's say, connections, the insurance companies and the reinsurance company. So, of course, the insurance was connected to both. We didn't provide cover losses, but that's why it took us such a long time to deliver a good index insurance, because there is a lot of risk, as you know, associated to this creation of insurance products. And we also went through a big validation process, again, with the government in Colombia to make sure that the product, let's say, was compliant with the law. So all of this helped to mitigate a bit the risk. But so we have launched the pilot now for 2 years. And we keep on improving it. And what I can say is that other countries are now also interested, and other sectors are also interested in taking the insurance. So corn, for example, was interested as well. Blue Marble started a program with them in Zimbabwe. And as such, I'm sure that it will be a discussion as we continue to evolve. For the moment, we don't cover any losses.
It's interesting because even what you're saying is you don't cover directly any losses, but you did solve one of the problems, because the cost of reaching to the farmers, of getting the information, the data, the relationship. So in a certain way, you did the risk through this partnership in a certain way to make this project. So sometimes understanding what assets you bring to the table other than money, because when you're Nespresso, you're a big company, money is part of the deal. I think it's interesting that there are other assets that you can bring to the table. And we have another question, and then we keep going to see how the insurance work. But Raymond, that is also a frequent, so I'm very happy to see that we're building a community. It's saying, have you added inputs from different external stakeholders, like you mentioned already, insurance, government return fund, cooperatives, satellite technology? Would you consider your business or this initiative, I would say, more as a private-public partnership, or what do you think?
So we do have a lot of stakeholders in the mix. Initially, we also discussed a lot with the Inter-American Development Bank, because they were also doing a development of insurance with UC Davis. But unfortunately, it didn't continue. But what we tried to do from the beginning was, how can we get the best stakeholders in the table, knowing that we didn't know so much about the insurance sector. And we were fortunate to find Blue Marble. Then we also were very fortunate to work with the University of Colombia, because they helped us on assessing weather and weather variations risk. And then I would go back to the beginning, where we worked a lot with fair trade. And the reason we worked with fair trade is because on the one side, we had certification for consumers, which is really something that talks to consumers, helping us sell more of our products. On the other side, fair trade has a connection with the cooperatives and helped us refine whatever we were going to offer them. Their name as well was on the line, and our name was on the line. So the more thinkers you had around the table, the better. And lastly, I go back again to the community and the fact that locally we had to connect ourselves very well. For example, we work with Blue Marble, but we had to find a local insurance company to carry the insurance. And we worked with Seguros Bolivar. And it was not an easy company to find, because most of them were scared. They told us, look, base index insurance is not something we usually do. We are not so interested in carrying it. But what they saw in that is that if they cracked this insurance with Nespresso in this cooperative and in this region, then it became a huge business for them, which is the case because now the full of Colombia is looking into the insurance. So in a way, if you have good stakeholders in the table, it can only help. It takes more time, but it helps.
we are doing some research with Patrick precisely on these multi-stakeholder collaborations and what different stakeholders bring to the table. And we're seeing that many times you have the NGOs or the certification or even the UN as a broker of trust that brings, and you have the private sectors that brings the private capital, and then you have an off-taker that is the company that also helps to de-risk and brings different things. So I think we are seeing some of these key issues working in blended finance, working in these initiatives that, especially if you want to have a systemic impact, you cannot go on your own and do it marginally, you know. So just because time flies, how did it work? And I know you have an interesting slide on how you pay the scheme, because I think it's interesting to see how it worked. And since we have some people that are specialists here also, yes. So I know
I'm sorry if I'm saying something wrong, because we had to learn really from scratch around the insurance world. So hopefully I didn't deceive any of you. Here you have a video on the tool that was used by AgriLogic, where you see like one square, what does it mean in terms of drought or excess rain, and when the insurance would pay. So in this case, you see the red dots are when the insurance start to pay because there's less rain. And then the green dots is whenever we don't pay because the weather was okay. And there you can see how we designed these maximums. So the maximum we chose was really the total loss that we could have seen in the previous 30 years. So here you see that we really went into quadrant per quadrant to pay back to the farmers. And this is how now we are using it to pay back. So far, there's been 2 big paybacks to the farmers, accounting for something like $100,000 US for the farmers on their losses since we started. And I guess that as climate continues to vary, this will be the case.
And I have worked on development, and I have seen how disruptive climate and droughts can be to incomes and livelihoods and production, and how they maybe two channels that go even beyond only income, because sometimes when farmers lose their income, they need to borrow. And when they need to borrow a very high interest, sometimes they disinvest from other things they do. And many times it's the schooling of their kids or other expenditures that are necessities. And even bad experiences of the past, I also have seen how that can work against investing in better quality coffee or in growing, because you think it's going to be destroyed anyway. So the perverse effect that not having this coverage has, and actually having this coverage, how can improve the livelihoods. And we have a question from Ashley here saying, how have Nespresso customers reacted to this effort to help farmers?
It's a good question. So
let me ask you, because I push you all the time on this one. Do your customers know that?
Yes,
I should have a talk here, and ask if any of you are Nespresso customers, if you knew about this.
Indeed. So yes, it's a really good question, Ashley. Thank you for that. And it's basically the reason I moved my jobs recently, because for a long time Nespresso has done a lot on sustainability. So on the coffee side, we really invested a lot. We care. The proof is that you have a Colombian talking to you about insurance, which is how we work. We really work with the community in the coffee fields. And as such, we didn't talk a lot about it in our communication, because you have the image of George and luxury, and then the image of sustainability, which is not so easy to share. You have a lot of people questioning, is this true, and can I really trust? And at the same time, in the past, luxury and sustainability were not talking to each other. And I do believe that now it's changing. Luxury, and let's say the new luxury, it's evolving to a sustainable luxury. And now we have the great opportunity to start to talk more about these things we are doing, because I would say before there was less interest, but as we see, climate change is affecting all of us, and we are all curious to learn what can we do. So we will start to do much more on sustainability and communication. I would say we were not so good in the past. So potentially you had never seen or heard this. we did do a big collaboration with Nagio on this last year, but still I would say it's a matter of repetition. It's a matter of really integration into the brand, and when you are a consumer, to see it all around your consumer journey, which for the moment I wouldn't say we are great at. So hopefully you will start to see much more of this in the coming months and years.
Yeah, and communication is always tricky, and I think for corporates, because if you communicate too much, it might look as greenwashing and you are profiting from smallholder farmers. But at the same time, if you communicate, you engage, and you have prototypes that were successful, other people can learn and replicate this. And I think the idea of inviting you today is not to do PR for Nespresso, but actually for other corporates to learn from the collaboration and the engagement, and actually to try to do this type of innovative solutions that sometimes go beyond of what you would think a corporation or a consumer goods company would do or should do. Because at the end, if you want to guarantee that high quality coffee and inclusive value chain and sustainable and not abusing resources, you need to get involved. And we have, I think, a very interesting question, but it's already time flies when you're having fun. I think it will be a good introduction for the end line. And if Gonzalo, that has been, I don't know if your name is Gonzalo or how it is. I'm reading just or Gonzalez, your last name. I don't know. But he's asking, what are the next improvements? What do you see for the near future? So what have you learned in this process? We always finish with some learnings, if you want, and what's next.
Okay, so do we still have a time for video, or we don't have?
I think we do. Just if you do the couple, I'll show, because I think it'd be nice to show people the farmers talking about it. But just summarize quickly 2 or 3 what's next and what are the learnings from this process.
Okay, perfect. So I would say on the one side, we learned that doing this type of programs takes time and takes a lot of expertise. You've seen we started in 2013 and only 2 years ago we launched crop insurance, for example. We saw that the industry can learn a lot from this, and what Vanina is saying, it's true. Some people can question, is this really your role? But at the same time, if we don't do anything, we won't have coffee. And we go back to the beginning where we said in 2050, half of the coffee can be gone if we don't react. So we thought we need to take responsibility for this. It's part of our business model, so we really need to do it well. I would say as a next step, we are now opening the pilots to other regions and other places. And whenever, let's say, a cooperative or a group of farmers want to take it into their region, we are happy that that is happening, because we didn't want from the beginning that this is a property of Nespresso, rather that we catalyze innovation, that we drive knowledge, and that we really bring something that is useful for the farmers. And as such, what we've been working on, and we are working also on this with Vanina, is on a vision for 2020-2030, because we see this is a decisive decade. Climate change and social inclusion are the 2 big things that are going to happen in the world. So we need to accelerate, and these are a bit the thoughts we're having. How do we accelerate even more these type of pilots to make them bigger, and so that people can learn and know about this? So I would say these are largely the learnings and the next steps.
So I will show to finish up, because I think it's interesting to see and to close again. Part of the objective of these webinars is to understand that there are players that can bring the financial side, or you can bring certain means, but there's also a catalytic role to bring others to the table. And so thank you very much. And there were a couple of questions, sorry, Latif, that I will not have time to address, but that you can contact through LinkedIn and directly Susana or myself later on. And let me show you the video to close up, because I think you will see face-to-face some of the Colombian farmers and their opinion.
El tiempo a veces no nos ayuda por el clima tan frío.
Mucho invierno, no florecen los cafetales.
Si no tenemos una buena economía, nuestras familias van a estar mal.
Muchos jóvenes que quieren estar en la finca, como hay otros que se van para la ciudad sin tener pues quien los apoye.
The Nespresso Farmer Future Program is transforming the system of social support and risk management for smallholders. of saving for old age retirement, and a crop insurance model to face the climate change risk. We joined efforts with the cooperatives and the Colombian national government, benefiting 1,700 coffee growers with our contributions.
Para nosotros fue una maravilla recibir los recursos que ustedes han recolectado, orientados a aportar a las cuentas de los adultos mayores para que ellos puedan recibir una anualidad vitalicia.
The program is a pioneer in rural retirement betterment, having 4 AAA cooperatives supporting the program and 4 non-AAA cooperatives following the example and started their own affiliations to the same program. On the other hand, we address the financial concerns regarding the climatic risks that affect the crops, contributing to the resilience of AAA smallholders by designing a tailored weather index insurance that offers protection from excessive rainfall and drought.
Si yo tenga mi café al sol y al agua, está protegido.
Hemos venido promoviendo el seguro de cosecha, que es una alternativa importante para nuestros asociados cuando por efectos del cambio climático ven disminuida su producción.
The crop insurance protection has extended its coverage to 2,250 farmers who own 6,420 hectares of coffee land, impacting the need of increasing the resilience of coffee as a business.
Right, so thank you so much, everybody. And so, as you know, at the ELEA Center for Social Innovation, we precisely have this goal of convening different players and trying to mobilize private capital to find innovative market solutions. So I was very happy to have you here, Susana, and to actually share with us this pilot, and we hope that it grows and scales up and gets industry-wide and in other industries too. And again, thank you, everybody. And actually, next webinar will not be on Wednesday, will be on Thursday, September 3rd. We will talk about blended finance. So again, we will talk about how to collaborate to mobilize private capital at scale to find solutions. So thank you, everybody, and see you, I hope, in 2 weeks. Thanks so much, Susana, for the generosity of your time and the very interesting innovation. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.